Hello and welcome to another edition of Only in Illinois, your weekly video recap from Reboot Illinois. I'm Madeline Dubeck here with Matt Dietrich. And this week, since there's really nothing new on the budget and pension front, we thought we would talk about convergence of new entrepreneurship kind of colliding with old government bureaucracy. And this is happening in the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois. And the city of Chicago kind of led the way, so to speak, with a few things this week. And the biggest one was the rideshare services we've heard so much about. What did the city do?
Well, this has been a big issue for the last couple of years, ever since the emergence of rideshare companies like Uber and Lyft and Sidecar. And what has happened is you have in Chicago a very well entrenched taxi industry that goes back for decades, since the invention of the automobile. And the way things are today, there are 7,000 licensed taxi cabs in Chicago. And in order to have a cab on the road in Chicago, you have to have what's called a medallion. And it's actually a plaque, a metal plaque that goes on the hood of a taxi cab. And those traditionally have sold for several $100,000. There was an auction in 2013 when they put 50 new medallions up for auction, the city did, and the minimum bid price at that time was $360,000.
Wow.
So it costs a lot to put a taxi on the road. And what's happened since the rideshare companies have gotten stronger and become more popular is the taxi medallions have practically, the bottom has dropped out of the market. These are, taxi medallions traditionally had been transferred. There was a pretty active market in transferring cab medallions from between different companies or between smaller operators who might own a couple of cabs and hire a couple of drivers. And if you go back, say, to October of 2013, there were 30 transfers of medallions in October of 2013 for an average price of $330,000 each.
2 years ago.
2 years ago. So far this October, there have been zero. In fact, there have been no transfers since July. And in July, there was one taxi medallion transfer, and it went for $150,000. So you can see that the bottom has just dropped out, and it's because there's just a lot less value in having one of these expensive
permits. And a lot less regulation to
now
drive your car for Uber or Lyft or Sidecar.
And what's happened is you had Uber and Lyft and Sidecar came in and very quickly became popular because they're so convenient for users, and also they recruited very heavily for drivers. If you have a car and a license, you can drive for one of these, and you, in effect, you sort of become a taxi driver without having to have a $500 chauffeur's license, without having to have your car inspected annually, without having to go through any of the safety screening on the level that taxi cab drivers have to have.
Right.
So there have been a lot of, not violent clashes, but there have been protests at City Hall over this because the taxi drivers see it as, hey, these people are essentially unregulated and you're allowing them to operate,
Right.
do something about this. And the Uber drivers, meanwhile, have said, we want access to
the
airports. We want access to the popular passenger pickup and drop-off spots like Navy Pier, McCormick Place, in addition to the airports. So this week when the City Council, Chicago City Council, and Rob Emanuel were working out their budget, all of this stuff was taken care of. And what ended up happening was they added a 52-cent per ride fee on rideshare companies. 2 cents of that will go toward a fund that's intended to help taxi drivers defray the cost of those $500 chauffeur licenses. Now they have access to the airports, but it's a $5 pickup and drop-off charge every time they use it. So you've sort of had a leveling
of the playing field?
To an extent, yes. Yeah. But again, what's interesting about this is that you're literally this didn't even exist a couple years ago.
Right.
And if it weren't for the smartphone, which didn't come around till 2007, you probably wouldn't have this industry at all, because it's so handy to use when you're on the street, or quickly needing a ride and you're using your phone.
Well, and we know, if you have 7,000 cabs for City of Chicago, that's not enough.
And
during rush hour, when people are leaving work.
And supposedly Uber has 20,000 people driving for Uber, plus another, I think 2,600 or 6,200 more for the other rideshare companies, Lyft and Sidecar. So you're dealing with, 4 times as many of the rideshare drivers as you have cab drivers. So something was going to have to change. And this is one of those instances where the technology came on so fast, the industry changed so fast, and it got popular so fast that government really had a hard time dealing with how, what are we going to do here?
Well, it came at a convenient time, because the mayor and the alderman can use all the money they can get, right? And this is just a drop in the bucket, really, but every...
It would be, $48 million from the rideshare money, as compared to what we're looking at, 700 million in that area of a property tax
when
increase.
We're all done, right? Mm-hmm. Of several, exactly. So the other thing that they took the opportunity to tax this week as part of all of that was streaming services and cloud-based businesses, to the tune of another 40 million. So that it's the same kind of situation where it's this whole new realm that sort of crept up on everybody in the last few years. Right. It's not like there's so much of a fight over that, but what the government officials are going to need to figure out and also balance is, at what point are you discouraging entrepreneurship? Exactly.
And that leads nicely into sort of the next big technology news to come out of Illinois government. And this came at the state level, where Representative Mike Zalewski and Senator Kwame Raoul, both Democrats, they held a press conference to introduce a bill to establish some kind of regulatory framework for daily fantasy sports websites. Specifically, we're talking about DraftKings and FanDuel. If you've watched any sports on TV,
you can't miss it.
Any time, especially in the last, I would say, 6 months or so, there is no way you could not know what these two sites are all about, although you may not even know there are two companies, because the ads
Unless you fast forward through the commercials, because you've got it DVR'd or...
Because the ads are so similar.
Right.
Well, what's happened is these have become multi-billion-dollar businesses, and in the case, DraftKings was only started in 2012. FanDuel's been around since 2009. It's only been in the last few years, though, that they've really come on this strongly. One website that tracks this kind of stuff said that between June and the first weekend of the 2015 NFL season, these two companies had spent $150 million on TV advertising, which, if you were watching any of the Cubs playoff games and have continued to watch a World Series, you know that that's true.
Yep.
The problem is it's caught on so quickly, and it's everywhere, but there is not a state in the country that really knows what to do with this industry. And what Kwame Raoul and Mike Zalewski said this week was they want Illinois to be on the forefront, and they want Illinois to be the first state to establish some ground rules around daily fantasy sports. And they're not, the cynical response in Illinois is, they're just trying to tax it. They're trying to get some money out of it. That's not the intent, according to Representative Zalewski. Here is what he had to say about what they've got, what they want to do with it, and why it's not about taxing.
The focus of the legislation is not to tax fantasy sports. I think, first of all, it's such a new technology that we don't really know how to do it. And second of all, I think, frankly, it's a loser politically to tell people we're going to tax your fantasy sports. Everybody likes it. It's popular.
Okay, so here you have an industry that is kind of like sports betting, but from a legal perspective, though, what Representative Zalewski and Senator Raoul say is it's not. So it's not subject to regulation by the Illinois Gaming Board. Problem is,
So why isn't it gambling? Because you're not gambling, you're competing?
not a game of chance. You're not betting on a point spread. There's a whole lot of things.
Okay.
And this is one of the things you can identify what is sports betting, what is illegal. This is in a gray area, and we just don't know what to do. Now, Zaleski had another point, the reason why you need to have a framework, and he explained it this way.
My first concern with that is that there's going to be some sort of litigation. So maybe you have a FanDuel player, a DraftKings player that loses, and they don't feel that their money was properly protected in the escrow account. Or you have a plaintiff's attorney file class action and try to shut the sites down. And I frankly don't think that's healthy for anyone. It's not healthy for the people that enjoy playing the game. It's not healthy for the companies that want to thrive in Illinois. So let's add some certainty to the statute and try to make Illinois a state leader in how we manage new and emerging technologies.
So I just found all of this pretty interesting because all of this comes down to really the advent of the smartphone and how ubiquitous the smartphone has become. You can put in your lineup for your fantasy sports league. People have become used to, and if they're going to get a taxi or a ride, they can get on their phone and do it from there. And these things catch on, and it's very hard to keep up with the technology from a regulatory standpoint. So I just found the whole, the timing of this sequence pretty interesting.
And how are you doing in the Fantasy Hockey League in Springfield?
Well, if you go on to rebootillinois.com, I can take you back to an era when fantasy sports leagues existed only on paper, and that includes the famous Hokan-Lube Hockey League, of the State
Say
Journal
that fast 5 times.
Right, of the State Journal Register newsroom in Springfield, Illinois, circa 1991. I did win $3, having done no research for my draft, and I consider myself pretty lucky on that one. But we were on the forefront of this industry, and I think we probably deserve a cut.
You kind of missed the boat because you didn't create FanDuel or DraftKings.
Hey, it was all on paper.
All right. Well, that's it for this week's edition of Only in Illinois. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week.